FM radio. These TV and radio networks are all coming out of Boston. Radio and TV that cares about Boston and beyond. This is yours sincerely, Mike D. of the UA7 Gospel Countdown. Tune in and be blessed.
This is Renee Wise, station manager for the Boston Praise Radio and TV network of 30 radio, TV, social media, and internet stations. You can broadcast on our network by just giving me a call, 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685.
Good morning, good morning. I'm Alana Beerfields, and I hope you're having a great morning already.
Good morning.
Yes, and I'm Nicholas St. Fleur. I'm a science and health reporter with STAT, a sister publication to the Boston Globe, and I cover racial health disparities.
And you're listening to episode 6 of Black News Hour, a new radio partnership between the Boston Globe and the historic Boston Black News. We are here as Black journalists to bring conversations about the news of the day to our loyal BABN listeners just like you. So I'm excited to bring you into the show today.
Yeah, today it's all about mental health. You know, emotional and mental wellness is something that can be difficult to talk about, but it's just so important, especially for our community. And for many people, the pandemic has heightened mental health concerns, as well as made it more difficult to access some of the support networks and tools that can help. I mean, I know that I'm definitely looking to kind of learn more and to find a therapist as well, and to really take action when it comes to my mental health this year.
No, thank you, Nick, for opening up about that you are on the lookout for a therapist. I think that's just is the first step of how to really break down those barriers of when we talk about mental health. And that's why we're so grateful to have an amazing lineup of guests on the show to break this down about mental health and community wellness. First up, we have Dr. Stephanie Pinder-Ackermer and Dr. Christine Crawford will walk us through how the pandemic has impacted mental health. And Dr. Charmaine Jackman and Dr. Martin Pierre will speak with us about racial disparities in mental health care and the particular challenges facing Black men when accessing care. And Tanya Burton will be on to share community approaches to wellness. And finally, Dr. Simone Ellis will talk about COVID-19 disparities and what she plans to do in her new role at Harvard Street Neighborhood Health Center.
It'll be great to hear from such a full lineup today, and we want to hear from you all, too. So if you have any questions during the show, we're here for it. Ask us on Twitter using the hashtag BlackNewsHour. And for more content like this, or to subscribe to our BNH newsletter, you can visit globe.com/BlackNewsHour.
So basically get on your phones right now and give us a tweet. And just as a note, there will be mentions of mental illness and suicide on today's show. If you or someone you know needs help, please don't hesitate to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255, and they're there for you 24/7. So first up, I'm excited, beyond thrilled to be bringing in our first guest, Dr. Stephanie Pinder-Ackermer and Dr. Christine M Crawford. They're going to talk to us about mental health during the pandemic, which is really critical at this time. And Dr. Stephanie Pinder-Ackermer is a practicing clinical psychologist at McLean Hospital's inaugural Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. And she's also the founding director of McLean's College Mental Health Program And she doesn't just do that. She also is a consulting psychologist at the Boston Celtics, and she's on a book tour right now. So, which is really exciting stuff. The book is called "Did That Just Happen? Beyond Diversity," and it was just named by the Next Big Idea Club of being the best new read for Black History Month. So, everybody, go get that book.
Yes, and also we have Dr. Christine M Crawford, who I'm so excited to have chat with us today. And Dr. Crawford currently serves as the Associate Medical Director for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. She is also an Assistant Professor of Psychiatry and the Associate Director of Medical Student Education in Psychiatry at Boston University School of Medicine.
So I just want to bring them in right now and just thank you guys for both being here today to really break this down and honestly talk about such a critical moment right now. And the recent news, Chesley Chris, she passed away, and it just kind of shook up everyone around the world. When I found out that news, my mouth literally dropped. Chesley Chris was a Miss USA 2019 champion. She was only 30 years old. She also was a correspondent for Extra TV, and she had this, beautiful light about her for what we could see on social media. So just really want to bring into the guests right now, and I can't thank enough for Dr. Pinder Ackerman and Dr. Crawford to talk about this big news right now. And, Nick, when we keep talking about these conversations, where were you when you heard about the news?
It was really weird for me. I had just the night before, I was looking at Express. I was looking at some new suits and such, and at the bottom of Express, they had this thing about Chesley. She's, I guess, an ambassador for them. And I was looking, I was like, oh, gosh, I like her hair. Who is this person? So I started looking her up. I was like, oh, wow, like, she's so accomplished. That's so great to, see someone like that who's doing so many big things. And then the next day, I saw the news, like, on Twitter, and I was just like, wow, that is just so sad, so eerie as well for someone who, looks to have everything really going for them. And it's just so sad. It really goes to show that, you never know what people are dealing with, and it just goes to show that, we really need to be more open about these conversations on mental health as well. So it was sad to see.
Right. And I think it's also a testament to that social media is not a reflection of what is happening in people's lives right now. It is just a highlight reel right now. And, again, I'm really excited to be bringing in two guests right now. So thank you again for Dr. Pinder Amaker and Dr. Crawford to be talking to us right now on what the mental health state looks like.
Thanks for having us.
No.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And hello to you, Dr. Crawford. Oh, and hello, dear friend. It's so nice to be able to connect like this. It really is. We're having a moment.
Yes, we love it.
Thank you for having us both. We're delighted to be here.
No, thank you for joining us right now. I just want to dive in right now and we continue to have conversations about mental health, and some people are reluctant to get help. They don't know where to go. And I think at this point in our culture that we have to start normalizing when we discuss mental health. So for the both of you, how do we get there?
Well, I'll jump in here. First, full disclosure, I really love this topic about what we're talking about is creating a culture shift. And as we think about how to get there, we want to think about all the actions that we're planning to take, thinking about whatever the interventions are. We want to ask ourselves at the outset, is this strategy something that I can sustain over time? Because we can't shift culture by a one and done. Like, that just won't work. So one of the shifts that's happening right now in our community that's really, I think, very exciting, I'm excited to talk about today, is that we, as a result of the events the really tragic events that have been happening for the past 2 years, we are talking now more in the Black community about mental health than ever before. We're having these conversations, and this is huge because for so long, the topic of mental health, mental illness specifically, has been taboo. But these conversations are happening everywhere. They're happening in our homes, in our churches, in our community centers, in barbershops. So one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we don't let off the pressure. We have to keep these conversations going, just like we're having here today. Because with these increased conversations, we are creating, at the same time, a greater demand for service. So people are kind of pushing past the stigma, which has been a long-held narrative in our community, and really insisting on answers, seeking for help, specifically looking for Black therapists and culturally responsive therapists, for which we know there are far too few.
I think the other interesting thing about this period of time is that with more people having conversations about mental health, we're kind of removing the image that a lot of us had in our minds as to what constitutes a person who is living with a mental health condition. And the reality is, it's any one of us. It's our families, it's our teachers, it's our doctors, it's everybody that's impacted by mental illness. And so I really appreciate that there are a lot of prominent Black figures who are stepping out, talking about their anxiety and depression, because that's sending the signal to a lot of Black folks that you can be successful, have a meaningful life, and still live with a mental health condition. It's not a situation where it's those people over there. This is a condition that's part of all of us, part of our families, and we need to talk more openly about that.
Yes. Thank you both so much for your input. So a question I have is, what are some of the signs that people should recognize first in themselves when it's, time to say, okay, I should really seek out a therapist right now? And what are the signs that people should be able to recognize in kind of their loved ones or someone they really care about, saying, hey, you're dealing with some issues. I think you should talk to a licensed therapist.
Now, it's really difficult for a lot of people who are experiencing mental health symptoms to recognize when it's a problem versus just normal emotions, just normal everyday feelings. The thing that I tell everyone to keep in mind is that you need to look at whether or not your mental health symptoms are interfering with your ability to function. Are they interfering with your ability to go to work, to go to school, to maintain meaningful relationships with your friends and family members? If you notice that you're not sleeping enough, you're so tired that you're falling asleep at the job, you're not able to take care of your kids, if you're losing weight, you're not eating in a healthy way, and you're noticing that it's difficult for you to make decisions, to concentrate, and you're having significant periods of low mood, and this goes on for a couple of weeks in a row, that certainly is a signal that talking to a mental health professional and or your primary care provider about the symptoms that you're experiencing is worthwhile. Oftentimes in this conversation about mental health, the automatic reaction is you need to see a therapist. But however, mental health is part of overall health. And so talking to your regular doctor, a nurse practitioner, your primary care provider is a reasonable choice because they are monitoring for some of these symptoms, because we know the impact that mental health has on physical health. And in terms of loved ones and family members, if you start to notice that there are some changes in behaviors of your loved ones, they're not showing up to different activities that they usually attend, they're not going to church, you're noticing that their appearance is somewhat disheveled, it's best to comment on some of the behavioral changes and say something like, hey, I noticed that you've missed church the last several weeks. I wonder what's behind that. What are your thoughts? Or I noticed that you've been behind some of these deadlines for work. What do you think is behind that? Rather than jumping in and making the assumption and saying, you're depressed, you need to see a therapist. Because that shuts down the conversation. It doesn't open up space. It allows for an opportunity for the person to really share with you what they've been going through what's on their mind, and what they think they need in order to get through this difficult time.
I just want to underscore and amplify something so important that Dr. Crawford just said, and it was about the length of time to notice these changes in symptoms. So often when we talk with people, how long should you wait if you're noticing some of the behaviors that she just described to us? And there's something that cannot be emphasized strongly enough. She said, if you're noticing these things persist for 2 weeks or more, 2 weeks, not 2 months, not 2 years, 2 weeks. And I think it's an important fact to get out there to people, that because often we suffer in silence with many of the signs that Dr. Crawford just described and fail to address these symptoms. And if we allow them to persist over time, they can worsen.
No, I think you guys both brought up really great points talking about, having these conversations and at the barbershop and even at the hair salon, these, especially for the Black community, when you go to these places, you feel welcomed. You feel like you can just talk whatever is on your mind. And it's a way for you to just be open what is happening in that moment. Dr. Pinder Ackerman, I want to talk to you a little bit more because you are a consulting psychologist at the Boston Celtics. And when we look at these athletes, especially for the Celtics, they have stepped up to say that they are in therapy, that they are getting help. And I think we've seen that across the board, especially with LeBron James, of how he talked about it's not just him being at the physical 100%, but it's also being 100% mentally. And he's even partnered with the Calm app, another meditation place that people can go to. So I feel like it's also that no matter who you are, you can be affected by this in this world right now. And I just want to get your point on how do you navigate these situations, getting help, especially when you don't have insurance? Like, where can they go for resources?
Such a good question. I think one thing that's happening right now as a result of what we were talking about earlier, people are really stepping up to bring many new resources online. And it's just incredible to see. So one way that you can begin to find a referral is to access some of these phenomenal resources that are coming online. Another good way to begin looking for, I should say before we talk about accessing treatment, is to know that it is a challenge right now. There is a significant demand for services. Demand for therapists is really high. So I just want anyone who's listening, who's thinking, who's sort of motivated to maybe start looking for someone, trying to find a provider, do not be discouraged. You have to be persistent. And so access some of these resources that are out there. As I said, many of them are coming online. A really good strategy, because we are having more of these conversations in our communities. Find a trusted friend, talk to them, find a referral from someone who has seen a therapist or has sought help. I think you'd be surprised if you haven't tried this strategy before. You'll be surprised to find out how many of your friends actually are in or have been in therapy, and that can be an excellent place to begin. Employee assistance programs can also be a good confidential option, and many people sort of bypass that, but it's a place to get sort of streamlined into and connected to services quickly through the place where you are working.
Wow. No, that's fantastic. I just want to thank you both again so much for sharing your insight. Thank you so much, Dr. Pinder Amaker and Dr. Crawford, just for being here and providing some of those signs for when people should really listen to their mental health, listen to their bodies, and seek out help, and how to approach asking or talking to others, to loved ones, about seeking help as well. As a reminder to our listeners, if you or anyone you know needs help right now, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. They're always on call to support you.
And we'll remind you of that number throughout the show, as well as hear from experts on mental health resources. But first, a quick public service announcement. Let's keep the conversation going with the Globe's Black News Hour newsletter. Sign up for exclusive show recaps, go deeper on the issues impacting our community, and take part in celebrating Black lives, all curated by Globe journalists. Sign up now at globe.com/Black News Hour.
Great. Well, next up, we have Dr. Charmaine Jackman and Dr. Martin Pierre to talk about mental health in Black communities. Welcome to the show. Dr. Charmaine F. Jackman is a Harvard-trained licensed psychologist with 23-plus years in the mental health field. She is the founder and CEO of InnoPsych, Inc., an organization on a mission to disrupt racial inequities in mental health.
And Dr. Martin Pierre is co-founder of Ashmont Counseling Associates to provide culturally sensitive treatment to individuals, families, and organizations. In July 2020, Pierre stepped up to a new platform to continue that work when he was elected as the first Black president of the Massachusetts Psychological Association, a 1,700-member professional society for psychologists.
Wow. Wow, what great work for the community. Thank you both just for being here. So I have a question here to kind of start us off here. The city of Boston is set to tackle the plight of Black men and boys, with a new office.
Right. Yeah.
And one issue, yeah, go right ahead.
No, I think this is really important, especially for you as a Black man, on what society looks like when you are asking for help, because for so many years as a Black man, you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to not cry at all. And you and I actually talked about this on NBC's new show called The Grand Crew, where there's a group of men talking about their emotions.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm excited just to learn more about what we as Black men can do to really take care of our mental health. I know in the last segment we were talking a bit about being at barbershops and the kind of community care that can be there. But I think a lot of this also comes from just being there for your brothers, being there for your friends, just asking, checking in, saying, hey, how are you doing? In the last segment we had some insight about when it's time to really have that conversation with someone who might be struggling with their own mental issues or depression and such. So I think some strategies going forward, I just think that's just so important. And I know for me as myself, one thing I struggle with is just the stigma of seeking out help as a Black man. Just wondering to myself, who do I ask? How do I find the right therapist as well? So I just think this is just such an interesting area to be discussing, just an interesting area to be learning more about.
Conversation ahead of us, really deep diving on this, because it's important to be vocal about it no matter what. So we want to go to Dr. Pierre, who is on the line right now. So thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
And congrats to you. You've been doing a lot of great work in the community.
I applaud it. I stand on the shoulders of giants. Thank you.
Yes.
No, for sure. And, one thing we know is that Boston is set to tackle, the plight of Black men and boys with a new office. One issue to face is, as I was talking about, the stigma of Black health, which has been amplified more during COVID. Statistics show the disparities in treatment. But even if Black men seek the help, they are likely looking for a fellow, Black man for help. But there is a shortage of those professionals in the state. How, as leader of the MPA, how can the organization help bridge those gaps, in your opinion?
Yes. So let me just start by saying that there are 6,000 psychologists in the state of Massachusetts, and 1,700 are members of NPA. And in regards to psychologists in the workforce, only 5% of psychologists of color makes up the workforce nationally. And so what the NPA has been doing is that we have been engaging in self-reflection and self-interrogation in order to address the issues around anti-racism. And so we've been intentionally thinking about how to increase the pipeline for psychologists of color. Now, one of my presidential initiatives is to develop a graduate student support group called the Committee of Ethnic Minority Affairs. And one of the goals is to help create pipelines, to create mentorship, starting in the high school as well as college, to engage students, to get them interested in the discipline of psychology, and also to provide graduate students with resources in order to succeed in graduate school. I personally have mentored about 7 doctoral programs in and out of graduate schools. The competition is very fierce. They only accept about 5 to 7 students per cohort per year. So we really have to catch these students very early so that we can increase the pipeline and thus increase the workforce.
No, I think that you're right on it, especially creating that pipeline. I think it's also to see the reflection, right? So when you see Black young men looking up older Black men and they're having those open conversations saying, hey, I am getting help, don't be afraid of it. Nick and I have been having that constant conversation back and forth on what it looks like for him to reach out for help, because he's also looking for a therapist right now. So I want to ask you, what are ways for you to look for a therapist, and how do you know that you're a good match?
I think one of the ways in looking for a therapist, one is to really seek out resources that are available. There are a number of resources and websites that are designed by culturally competent psychologists in order to meet the needs of this diverse population. There are different websites such as Psychology Today and other mental health websites. I think the first thing that you want to do is to interview the therapist during that first session. Ask them what their theoretical orientation is. Ask them, do they have experience in working with underserved and historically marginalized populations? Ask them whether they are trained in culturally competent and evidence-based practices to serve your needs. And it's really about having a conversation. Historically, males of color, particularly Black males, have not sought out therapy because of the stigma associated with being male, as well as the stigma associated with mental health, particularly because of the stereotypes and the images associated with being male. So I think it's important to have that honest conversation about what it means to have the service of that therapist. For example, ask them, have they ever been victims of racism and systemic oppression? I think what that does for the therapist and the client is to provide permission to open up the dialogue around race, because race is inextricably connected to mental health, particularly what is happening in this country today. And those factors have exacerbated issues around mental health, issues including anxiety, depression, as well as substance use.
Mm-hmm. So I really want to hop on what you said about stigma and the importance of overcoming that stigma. I remember growing up when I was in college, I had some issues, some bouts of depression. I remember talking to my dad saying, maybe I should see someone or something. And I remember quite vividly him saying to me something along the lines of, black people, we don't see therapists. That's for white people. Like we just tough it out. And I remember that kind of sticking to me for a bit. And I'm wondering, how do we break down some of those stigmas? What's your advice for the community?
I think the advice for the community is to have some honest conversation about mental health issues. There's this no talk rule, and mental health is just like any other health issues, whether it's medical health. And so if you have a medical issue, you will, in fact, go see a doctor if you have a broken leg. Well, our minds are similarly, when we have mental health issues, it not only affects our mind, but it affects our body. And I think finding space that is safe for particularly black males to have these issues so that they could affirm and support each other, so that they know that they aren't crazy, that they too are experiencing some of these issues. And talking about cultural mistrust, I mean, the black community historically has not trusted the medical establishment because of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And so having honest conversations about what it means to address some of these mental health issues that is consistent across the lifespan for black and brown people.
No, for sure, Dr. Pierre, for sure. I mean, you kind of just walked right into my wheelhouse. I do a lot of reporting on medical mistrust in the black community. And, as you said, there are historical precedents, but there are also so many present-day precedents as well. Instances where, you might have your mom or your auntie go see a doctor and something, and you just feel the care isn't there. You just feel there's something that's off about it. And that can leave, psychological scars in us, in terms of just thinking about how do we get care? How do we seek this out? I wanted to first just do a quick introduction. We have our other guest here, Dr. Christine F. Jackman, who, as we said earlier, is a Harvard-trained licensed psychologist with 23-plus years in the mental health field. She's the founder and CEO of InnoPsych, Inc., an organization on a mission to disrupt racial inequities in mental health. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Jackman. Dr. Jackman, do we have you? Do you hear me?
Well, as we wait for her to come on in, Dr. Pierre, you had mentioned really about, how do you find a therapist and the pipeline and, seeing how we can bring these conversations to light. But what if somebody has a therapist right now and they want to break up with them, essentially? It's just not going well. There's microaggressions in the conversation. You feel like you have to explain yourself, what it means to be a black woman or a black man in a workplace surrounded by white people. So how do you navigate those tough conversations?
Well, part of being a consumer is increasing agency. And I think it's important for particularly black and brown folks to know that we have choices. And one of the mantra in psychotherapy is to do no harm. So having an earnest conversation with your provider and saying, I really don't think that we are a good match. I really don't think that that my goals are being met, and I'm not being held, or I'm not being listened to, and I think I may need someone else to really carry on the work, because I believe that the work that we have done already needs to be further. And so I think it's important for people to know that we could take charge of our own health and be advocates for ourselves. There is this idea that there is this sort of hierarchical order, right? That the healthcare providers are the experts, and they are supposed to tell us what to do. But we are the experts in our own lived experience as well as our own psychological lives. So we could make that decision to ask that therapist for a referral to a culturally competent or culturally humble therapist. Or we could seek out those other providers ourselves. So we have the agency to change our therapist.
No, thank you for that. I think change is on its way. Right now, we're going to be bringing in Dr. Charmaine F. Jackman. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you.
And, as we hopefully get Dr. Jackman, but if not, Dr. Pierre, you have been bringing so much insight on where the state of mental health is right now. I also want to bring light on why it's critical to use an asset-based approach for positive mental health and well-being.
Did you say an asset-based approach?
Correct.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's important because too often we focus on what's wrong with Black and brown people. I think it's important to focus on the strength in our community, like what brought us over, what were the things in the past that help us overcome some challenges in our lives. And so Black and brown people, particularly Black males, come with tremendous strength, whether it's the creative art, whether it's a sense of spirituality, whether it's a sense of hopefulness. We are writers, we are musicians, we are rap artists. And so these are aesthetics that we could use in order to reflect on some of the challenges and the pain that we have been experiencing in our lives. So rather than taking a deficit model, it's important to focus on a strength-based model.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pierre, for coming in today to just really break down all of this, because these are tough conversations to have. Dr. Jackman, hopefully we'll be having her on another show. Right now we're having technical difficulties. And again, for anyone that is out there, please use the hashtag Black News Hour on Twitter to keep if you have any questions at all for us.
Yes. Now, moving forward, Dee Dee's Cry presents its first Mental Health While Black Summit on February 18th at the Encore Boston Harbor Center. This summit's purpose is to bring together residents, grassroots organizations, community partners, healthcare professionals, and elected officials to talk, listen, and learn from one another in efforts to help combat the challenges of mental health and suicide prevention services in communities of color. For more information about Dee Dee's Cry and the event, visit deedescry.com to learn more.
And now let's meet the founder and co-executive director of Dee Dee's Cry, Toy Burton. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am okay. Thank you so much for asking.
So I really want to talk about right now, you have a summit coming up, and you're bringing all these great professionals together in one room. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
So this will be our first year. Mental Health While Black is Dee Dee's Cry's signature event. We started it in 2019. That was our first Mental Health While Black event. And it's about people sharing their stories to let others know that they're not alone, and just to give them strength and let them see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So this event is an all-day thing. Starting at 8 a.m., we will have guest speakers, we will have breakout workshops, breakfast and lunch will be served, elected officials will be there, because they're the ones who make the policy, so it's very important for them to be in these spaces.
Wow. Tori, thank you so much. I have a question. I do a lot of reporting on just health inequities. I do a lot of reporting particularly on Black maternal health. And one thing I found through that reporting is, people who lose a loved one to in that case, Black maternal, related issues, they form a community with each other. They find each other, and they become a family. And it sounds so similar to what you just described. Talk to us a bit about finding family during these moments of tragedy.
So even with maternal health, in September, Dee Dee's Cry had maternity and mental health. Because so many times in our community, we don't talk about postpartum depression or loss of or having a stillborn or miscarriage. And so it was really important that we had that discussion and that conversation, and just to let women know that they are not alone, that it's okay to share that. I myself had 2 stillbirths in the 80s. And during that time, the doctors come in the room and was like, "Would you like your tubes tied?" And I was grieving at that time, and they shouldn't have asked me that. I agreed to it at the time, but I was still young. Like, who's to say that when I was 30 that I didn't want to have a child? So I share that story so women know that, don't make that decision. There was nobody in the room with me to say, don't ask for that right now. So it's important that we share our stories and find our family within the community and those who can give us strength.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and sharing those vulnerable moments. It's so important to hear. Especially, I'm happy you touched upon like postpartum depression, because that is another area where we need to overcome certain stigmas when it comes to just telling people how we are doing and reaching out as well. But when it comes to your work here, tell us a bit about just what it means to you to have this organization, to have Dee Dee's Cry right now, named after your sister. Tell us about the importance of just having that and being able to, welcome other people who go through similar tragedies.
Well, starting Dee Dee's Cry was not like on my to-do list. So in 2017, I was posting about my sister, on her birthday, if she had lived, because she died by suicide when she was 23 in 1986. So I was posting, if she had lived, it would have been her 55th birthday. And a friend of mine whose brother had just died by suicide, she had inboxed me, like asking me, how hard it is and when will the pain stop and things like that. After our exchange, I just went to Google just to see what was out there for suicide. And being on these websites, I got angry because I didn't see anybody who looked like me. And where their events were happening, I was like, this isn't for somebody who lives in Roxbury, Dorchester, or Mattapan. I was like, I'm going to create something to connect the community to the resources. So I'm not a clinician. I don't have degrees. I'm a preschool teacher. But I love my community, and I felt like we should have suicide prevention and mental health education, too.
Tori, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Again, Dee Dee Cry's Mental Health While Black Summit will be on February 18th at the Encore Boston Harbor Center. We've been talking a lot here about mental health, and we know these conversations can be difficult. As a reminder to those listening in, if you or anyone you know needs help, it's available. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 at any time. They're there 24/7.
And also, if you have any questions at all, please use the hashtag Black News Hour on Twitter. And finally, our last guest, Dr. Simone Ellis, is a family physician and the newly appointed medical director of the Harvard Street Neighborhood Health Center. She aims to further Harvard Street's mission to improve local health outcomes and increase access to quality and comprehensive health services.
Today, in the COVID era, the illness has disproportionately impacted the Black community. So we welcome Dr. Ellis to the show to discuss this issue and what she plans to do in her new role at HSNHC. Dr. Ellis, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, good morning. Happy Friday.
Yes,
Good
happy
morning.
Friday.
Good morning. So,
Yes,
tell us a
for having
little bit about yourself and about your goals and aspirations in this new position.
Sure. So, as you introduced me, I'm Dr. Ellis. I am currently the new incoming medical director at Harvard Street Neighborhood Health Center. That is on Blue Hill Avenue. I am from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I am first generation American. Parents came to America for the American dream from Jamaica and Belize, and I am here just ready to go, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the community and the community needs.
I absolutely love that. You just really sound like you're about to hit the ground running. And but congrats to you, because this is big, to have a woman like you in this space and to really, make groundbreaking work happen. So again, I just want to ask you, where do you see this going? What is one of your goals that you want to tackle, especially when it comes to COVID and mental illness right now?
Right. So I heard a bit from the last caller, and I have to say the bottom line is representation matters, right? So just being who I am, I think, makes a difference, because you see someone who may look like you, and that right there starts the conversation. So where do I see me going, and where do I see Harvard Street going? I think we're going in a direction where we're really paying attention to what our community needs. This has been a difficult 2+ years of COVID. We're still in the midst of it. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of needs that are not being met. I mean, mental health, we've all been through a variety of things, just making the adjustments to this new normal. So moving forward, how do we make sure people are getting what they need? How do we make sure we're getting the word out that you still need to go to see your doctor, to do your cancer screenings? You still need to go in to check in, to know your blood pressure, your weight, all these things that may have changed throughout this time. I really just want to be here to represent the community. I want to be here to listen. I want to be here to make those adjustments so that people feel seen, they feel heard, and that's what I'm here for. This has been a lifelong dream, so being here is definitely an honor, and I will make sure that every patient who walks in feels that they will be getting world-class care. That's the goal.
That is so important to hear. It really is. I want to, where we're at right now with the pandemic after just coming, well, we're still in the midst of the, Omicron variant and such. It's slowing down a bit, but I want to know what makes this point in time, special or unique, or what are the unique challenges that you're facing right now during this point in time when it comes to, serving the community as opposed to other points in the pandemic?
Right. So I think at this point, there's COVID fatigue. We hear about it every day. It's on the news every day. It's been going on for quite some time. I think for us, for a lot of people, it's just a lot. And unfortunately, it has been placed in the back of people's minds. They're carrying on with their everyday activities. The thing is, it's not over, so we still need to be vigilant. There will always be changes as far as the guidance, but I believe everyone needs to look at, themselves and their family to say, I need to protect myself. I need to, I am my keeper, and we are all, our brother's keeper. But it's important that we make sure that we're protecting ourselves. So wearing the mask, hand hygiene, being mindful of your surroundings. It's important not to let down those things. We're still in the midst of it, and it's important to say, hey, if I'm not vaccinated, why is that the case? Reach out, talk to someone. Don't be, in your silo feeling as if you're dealing with it alone. This is something every single person in the world has been touched by. Every single person. It's a very powerful thing. So we all understand. And I think that if you're still not quite sure what to do, that's what we're here for. You can come in and you can, schedule an appointment and start the conversation.
Exactly. Start the conversation, because if the conversation is not being had, where do we go? And that's where you just you vocalize yourself. You say what the problems are. When you had said about protecting yourself from COVID, but having an open conversation again about mental illness, a lot for everybody that's been impacted by this. We've been home, right? So we've been trying to find things to do. What is the best practices that you have been telling people when they're home on how to de-stress? Like, what can someone do when they're at their house?
I think it's important really to not, even though we are in the midst of this isolation, it feels quite different than what we remember before this time. You know, I remember going to a concert a few years ago. It's been quite some time since those things, you know, are normal again. So I would say not, first of all, you're not alone. That's the first thing. I think there's some solace in knowing that everyone, you know, is going through the same thing. So that's important. Also, setting aside time so that you're reaching out to people around you. I think we're very dependent on the devices, and this time it may actually be helpful. Reach out to that person on social media who, you know, you're liking their posts or something. Like, establish a connection, and don't feel afraid to do so, because I feel we're all in the same place. People don't even know where to socialize. Like, do I go to the grocery store? Like, what should I do? But I think that we're social beings, and just acknowledging that if you are feeling that you are isolated, please reach out. Please say something. Just don't deal with it by yourself.
You know, since we're home, I mean, it's hard to not just go to the fridge. I've been doing that, opening up the pantry, like, what can I eat now? I'm about to binge watch this show. But for the Black community, our health is important because, you know, for diabetes and hypertension, all of it, what can people do to maintain their weight and to lose weight and to just basically have a proper diet right now?
Very, very good question. So I would say that this is very difficult. When you're inside, you're not moving as much, you're not doing your usual activities, things change. A lot of us have experienced that, where we may have difficulty keeping the weight off, or we're gaining weight that we never, you know, had on for years. So this is something that is quite common. I would say just because you're home doesn't mean you can't turn your home into a place where it's a wellness house, right? So you set up, regardless of how much space you have, you should be able to set up a small space where you can do something physical. There are a lot of free apps out there that you can have workouts. There's a lot of communities out there that you can connect to online, even if you're unable to meet in person, where you can do like challenges and check in. And really the most important thing is knowing your number, right? So for those of you who have not gone to the doctor in these 2 years, that's 2 years. That's a long time. Yeah. You should know and have that check-in. Like, there are basic things that everyone should know. You should know your blood pressure. You need to know your weight, right? You should have some kind of blood work done. If you have a history of diabetes in your family, do you know your numbers? Do you know what your blood sugar is when you're not eating? These are important things. So the only way to really start the process is to start, right? Wherever you're at, you can start where you are. It's very hard sometimes in life just to find the time, but I think it's just one of those things where you can just get up, you know, today. You say, today's the day. It's Friday. Let me just do something different. And that's how all of us are going to get through this and get out of it.
And Dr. Alice, I just have one kind of final question here for you, because, you know, it's just so important. You had mentioned earlier, you know, vaccinations and such. You know, we've been in the pandemic for 2 years. You know, there are still folks who aren't vaccinated, or there are people listening right now who have loved ones who they've been trying to convince to get vaccinated, or at this stage of the pandemic, you know, to get their booster shot. What's your advice for people listening in, trying to have those conversations with their loved ones about the importance of getting vaccinated and how COVID is, you know, it's still out there, and this is still our strongest form of prevention, that with masking and social distancing, against something that has taken, you know, over 900,000 American lives?
Excellent question. I think as a doctor, this is something that I talk to my colleagues about quite frequently, even before COVID. How do we get people to be open to vaccinations? And it's quite difficult. I think for me is the person who is not sure, or the family members who are not sure how to approach it, you really just have to start with what is that person's motivation? What are their barriers? Where are they coming from? Because this crisis has really brought a lot of division in the country. It's really brought out a lot of things that they're hard to talk about. It has been politicized. It has been turned into all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, it is a virus that is deadly. And we have a way to prevent serious complications with the vaccination. That is really the bottom line. And I think that if you can reach out to someone to understand their reservations, you can start from there. If you're not sure yourself, you can talk to someone who has received the vaccination and hear how they went through it and, how they feel now. To me, it's like we have so many things coming at us in this life. You have to pay your bills, you have to, take care of your kids, you have to take care of your parents, all these things. Why add the virus onto that list?
Exactly.
To me, personally, it doesn't make sense. Let's take that off the plate, get vaccinated. It's one less thing for you to really be so worried about. When this started, we were all terrified.
Exactly, Dr. Ellis. You have brought so many great points, and we just want to thank you so much for your time today, breaking this all down. And that's it for us today. Another reminder, if you or someone you know needs help, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Helpline at any time for any reason. The number is 1-800-273-8255.
Yeah, and thank you again, Dr. Ellis. I'm so happy we were able to wrap this conversation on mental health with another call to arms for getting vaccinations during this pandemic. The Boston Globe invites you all listening to nominate a nurse who has given you or your family special care within the past year. Select stories will appear in the special Salute to Nurses section publishing May 8th in the Boston Sunday Globe. The nomination deadline is March 20th at globe.com/nurses.
And I'm Alana Beerfield. Again, thank you for tuning in with us. And do not forget to tune in on February 25th. We will have another Black News Hour edition talking about the 10th anniversary of the death of Trayvon Martin.
And I'm Nick. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you all stay well and, take care of your mental health. Thank you for joining us.